What's up, Squadron? Aviation has given me a ton of amazing experiences. And more importantly, it's introduced me to a whole new family of friends. Join us tonight because we're cleared direct for some hangar flying. I'm Bryon Dembroski, and this is SuperAero Live. What's up, Av Geeks? SuperAero Squadron! It's Wednesday, which can only mean one thing. Well, apparently Wednesdays are only when massive, groundbreaking history happens in the United States. But more importantly, it's time for SuperAero Live. Folks, I'm so excited to spend tonight with you. I'm really excited to talk about the longest cross-country I've ever talked to anyone about in just a minute. But first, if you haven't after this and you need a bigger fix, go back and check out last week's episode with Trent Palmer, whatever his name is. We were talking about New Year's resolutions, specifically with New Year's flight resolutions, and I got motivated. I got super motivated, pumped. It was really good. Go check that out. And just hi to a bunch of folks in the chat real quick. Brian Petrus says, so much yelling. Yeah, we were yelling in all caps. Fly Chucky Flies here. Waukesha Pilots here. 782 Papa's here. Red Baron Modeling's here. Tango and Juliet are here. They're talking about jugs in the chat. I don't know what that's about. Nathan Ballard's here trying to give away BFRs. I don't know. Is anyone taking them up on that yet? Gary Smith, Ben Berg, all Marty's here. Zach's here. Outside's here. Everyone's here. And I'm really excited. But even more excited, let's stop talking about me. Did you remember to subscribe? Let's stop talking about me. Let's bring up our guest. Guil Barros is here. What's up, buddy?
Hey, how's everybody doing?
So we were talking, Vans Aircraft is here. And it looks like your friend Christine is here. So many people in the chat excited to talk about your journey, your trip. But I just before the show, you and I were talking a little bit about where you are right now. And yeah. I thought that was just separately a good story. So I don't know if we want to kick this off with just a little teaser of the amazing life you lead, because it's definitely cooler than my story.
This is my random hotel room in Birmingham, Alabama. So you guys probably saw in my travel videos and all that kind of stuff, I had a life raft, right? Like a big yellow, pull to inflate thing that I really wanted to pull to inflate, but I couldn't justify the cost of pulling to inflate, that we bought for the trip. And those things have a lifetime, right? You're supposed to overhaul them, just sort of like some airplane parts. And we paid to overhaul it before the trip, right? We bought it used out of time. It was timed out. And we paid to overhaul it. And it's expensive to overhaul in aviation monetary units. So I decided to sell it right after the trip, and I've just randomly just put it out there, see if anybody wants it. And finally, some guy bought it, and in Georgia, and we agreed on a price. And I said, hey, I'll just cover shipping, right? I just wanted to break even on this, so I'm breaking even, and I can cover shipping. I'm good. I said this before actually looking into what it takes to ship a raft. Turns out there's flares in there and compressed gas cylinders and, all sorts of things that FedEx and UPS don't actually want to have in their trucks. So instead of, bailing on the deal, I wasn't going to do that. I just said, well, I'll just fly it down there. So on Sunday,
I'll just fly it down there.
Yeah. On Sunday, it was cheaper than it would have cost me to ship it, believe it or not.
I guess that's the miracle of owning a RB9.
Yeah. So on Sunday, I flew down. I dropped it off at an airport outside Georgia, Cobb County, I think. And then I was like, well, what else do I have going on here? The plane's gotten a little bit of let's call it airplane rash. It's not really hangar rash. It's just it's an airplane, right? It gets dings and dents and little things like that. And I had been on and off talking to Jonathan at Plane Schemer / Evoke Aviation, who did our paint and design, about just coming down here and having him touch everything up, right? And he was totally cool with it. And I said, hey, I'm going to be there. Can I just stop in Gadsden, drop off the plane? You can have it for as many days as you want, and I'll just disappear into a hotel. So that's what happened. Sunday, I dropped the craft off and then flew to Gadsden, which is only like a 30-minute flight from Atlanta, and dropped the plane off, got a rental car, and then drove myself to Birmingham, where I stay at a certain hotel chain when I travel for work. So I wanted to pay with points, right? I mean, save a few bucks. And so I just parked, and I've been in this hotel room since Sunday. And all they do is just like slide pizza under my door, right? Like, I'm not going outside to see anybody. I'm I'm staying away from people, right? I'm trying to be safe. But, slide pizza under my door every so often, and I'll be happy.
So I just want to point, because I don't stay. I mean, it's been a while since I stayed at a hotel, but your hotel room's got a staircase.
I travel a lot for work. Let's just
get
it that way. So,
say,
when the hotel has fancy rooms that just aren't sold, right? Like right now when nobody's traveling, they're like, oh, you travel with us a lot. Why don't we put you in this room? So I have 2 floors.
They're like, what you look like you need a staircase.
That's right.
A luxury staircase. This happened to me once. I used to travel a lot too for work, and I had a pitch in Chicago, went to just randomly the cheapest hotels we booked. My company booked us at the Hard Rock Hotel or whatever, down on like across from Millennium Park or whatever. And it was like a Sunday night, and no one's at the Hard Rock Hotel on a Sunday night. They're all in jail from doing coke. And they just randomly put me in a room, it was a suite. It was 5 rooms, 2 bathrooms, pool table, and like vintage arcade games. I didn't sleep at all that night. I was exhausted by the pitch. Anyway, Nathan Ballard in the chat says, I know that hotel and room.
Oh, jeez.
So,
I'd be worried.
Right. So we kind of jumped the gun a little bit. So just to do the proper introduction. So Guil, you and I met a couple months ago, doing a builder's roundtable, because you are an aircraft builder. And one of the things I learned about when we met was, well, virtually, of course, was that you flew your RV9 to Brazil. So just in case anyone missed that, the reason you had the life raft is you flew from Wisconsin to Brazil.
To Rio de Janeiro. Yeah, tie the story together. Yeah.
That's a big thing. I mean, and I'm just going to pull up a photo here. This is you coming in, not in Brazil, I don't think. This is you, your RV that you built, which is, by the way, beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, this was actually after we got back, and we were in full COVID mode, right, in the U.S. So all of the major airports had no traffic, and I live in Madison, and I was like, maybe I'll go land at O'Hare and see what happens. So this was us, just like some random Friday, it's like, oh, can I do a low pass at O'Hare? And the controller was like, yes, but if you touch the ground, you have to taxi to the FBO and pay for your landing fees. I was like, okay, low pass.
Okay, not touching the ground. Yeah, Zach Sherman, I agree. He says that paint scheme looks amazing.
It is gorgeous. And I worked with Plane Schemer. I mentioned them twice now. They better give me a discount on the next one on this. And they were excellent. They were just
someone
fantastic.
Go tag them. Someone share this with the Plane Schemer social so they see all the press they're getting, so that Guil can get his hangar rash for free.
Right. So yeah, they were fantastic to work with, and they did there's 2 companies, Plane Schemer and Evoke Aviation, and they're like the same company. They're just like 2 separate corporate entities. So they did the design, and they give you the design, right? Like, they give you all of the specs and everything, so you can take it anywhere. And like I shopped it around, and their price was fair, and I was like, why would I go anywhere else, right? Like, why wouldn't I go with the guy who designs the paint, who knows exactly what I'm going for, right? Like, I don't need to explain to the new paint person, what it is, what's the vision here, right? Like, make sure not to screw this up, So
Right.
it just totally makes sense to go with them, and they've been fantastic and just phenomenal to work with.
So a
They'll get
little
my next one as well.
nice. So I wanted to ask. Oh well, actually, Lizaref, I don't know, asks what was the inspiration for that paint scheme. And I'm gonna flip through these photos. I don't know what order they're in here. I kind of lopped them together. Let's see if I can find some other ones. Oh, there's before the
That was
paint.
a bit more. Yeah, this was Sun and Fun, um, camping by the airplane at Sun and Fun. So we wanted a honeycomb thing, right? Like we were originally going to go with some sort of yellow and a honeycomb design, and it took us about a year. I have a bit of a pizza problem, you might have heard, and over the year that we went back and forth with Jonathan on like 100 different design changes. And we sort of settled on, like the honeycomb thing needed to stay, but I liked sort of the geometric thing, and it's just, I don't know, it just became this thing, and we love it, right? It's very different from uh, the usual paint scheme you see out there, which to us totally made sense. I remember at one point, I'm talking to Jonathan on the phone. I was like, Jonathan, this is really different, right? Like I don't want this plane to stand out, and I'm worried about it. And he's like, you are paying for a custom paint job on an airplane. Why would you paint it white with stripes?
Right.
Everybody else has white with stripes. And I was like, yep, you are right. We'll do the crazy thing.
I think I have these photos in the wrong order because the plane is getting less and less finished and less
So that's a
painted.
different airplane. That's a different airplane.
Oh, this is the
That's
RV10 that you're building.
yeah. So the other story here is, so we came back from Brazil. We're not even talking about Brazil yet. We'll get to Brazil, I promise.
Yeah, I
We
promise
came back.
everyone we'll get to Brazil.
It took a while to get there. It'll take a while to get there here too. Um, when we got back from Brazil, right, this pandemic thing is going on, and I was like, oh my gosh, right, like I won't be able to leave the house. What am I going to do with myself? I'm going to go crazy. And Mary hears this, and she says, you can't build another airplane. She didn't really say that, but I could hear it in her voice. And then I was like, I should build another airplane. And I looked online. I was like, maybe I should buy and see if I can find an RV10 kit, right? A used RV10 kit. There's always something flying around. And I want to say the same day where like I'm sitting, like I'm like doing a Zoom thing or whatever with a bunch of friends, and I'm just browsing the web, just searching for RV10 kits. And this one shows up in, I think it was New Jersey or Maine, somewhere on the East Coast. And the price was pretty damn good. He wanted half price effectively for the tail kit, the empennage, and the wings. For those of you that maybe aren't familiar with RV kits, you get a tail kit, a wing kit, a fuselage kit, a finish kit, and then a firewall forward kit and some other stuff. So the first two kits are the ones that you can usually find unfinished from builders that started, and for whatever reason, life didn't work out and they didn't finish it. So finding both from the same guy was just perfect, right? So I sent him a message and I was like, hey, like I'm really sort of just thinking about this, right? Like this seems, I've built before. I know what I'm getting into. I'm thinking about this. And I jokingly said to him, you're in the East Coast. I'm in Wisconsin. I have I'm not going to drive, out there with a truck right now where we're starting to get a little weird about this virus thing. But if you can get it to me, I will pay you asking price for it. And he says, you're in Wisconsin, huh? I'm going to be in Indiana on Sunday. It was like Thursday. And I was like, do you have a trailer? And he's like, yes. And I know it fits. It's like, man, this was
Done.
meant to be.
Done.
Yeah. So I had an RV10 kit on that Sunday. It was awesome.
You have a
And that
very
was this.
understanding life partner.
Yeah. You've seen her in a couple of the pictures there. She builds with me quite a bit. Like we're doing this together, right? I think the way we did the first one was, I started it and then we figured out that we weren't going to see each other for the next 3 years if I was just going to be building an airplane and she was going to be doing her thing. So she joined me and she's been building an airplane with me. Let's say since, right? She's down in the workshop. I'm going to say maybe half the time that I'm in the workshop, she's down there pounding rivets, drilling holes, whatever it needs to do. So she's. I was just looking at the numbers. I'll pull them up later, but in 2020, I think I worked about 800. I just got a damn right text message from her. That was the ding. In 2020, I think it's either 600 and something or 800 and something hours so far on the 10. And of those, she worked 400 of them with me. So
whoa, that's awesome.
Two airplane builders in the household.
I love that. Also, what I love, just to slightly divert for a second, Nathan Ballard with the super sticker, and again, I can't see it, but this is maybe the funniest one I've seen so far, description-wise. Hippo character collapses to the ground as his chair breaks while the words "wrecked" appear above him. I love that alt text. Nathan, thank you so much, man. Jonathan Christman with the follow-up with character jumping up and down saying #1 fan. Jonathan, you might just be. Thanks, guys. That's amazing. Thanks for supporting the channel. That's really cool.
Nice.
You guys are awesome. Nate, and seriously, Nathan separately has been texting me. We've been talking. He thinks he's stayed in this exact hotel room you're sitting in. And I can't decide if that's creepy or cool that we know that.
If he can call out which floor it's on, I'll be weirded out.
Okay, the challenge is on. The challenge is on. Okay,
it's a really nice room. It's a great place to spend a week, right? Like I'm sitting here for a week, not leaving the room.
Did you bring any RV10 parts to work on while you're?
Oh, I wish. Yeah. Christine and Ty right now are just running ahead of us. We had sort of reached parity, and now they're just like way off.
So we promised people Brazil, but so you guys built this amazing amazing RV9. I think that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
It looks like Chicago.
That's right.
And it probably takes. Oh, there! I should have shown this picture while we were talking about your building adventures together. Which, by the way, the beard there looking nice. Also,
it hasn't really been trimmed since February, I think. Now,
go home. But so you've got this beautiful aircraft. It's painted amazingly. You apparently put gas in it. What talk me through the decision to do I think this is the RV10 stuff. As you guys decide to fly to Brazil, like what's that to me, I'm going to be honest with you, like that to me is, I've dreamt of doing a world flight, but it is so far in the dream zone, right? Like that, like I know people say like it's just a lot of tiny cross countries, but that's a big trip. So where did that idea start?
It's sort of evolved, right? I think at one point I joked about how, we should just fly to Brazil, right? And Mary in her usual deadpan is like, yeah, okay. And that gets me thinking, and I was like, maybe we can fly to Brazil. And that led to very slowly investigating, okay, what would this take, right? Like, is this really feasible? Is there a lot of water? Is there, like, how many hours would it take? How difficult are the different government entities to deal with here, right? Because you go through, I think, 7 different countries, I think is what we figured out. And they each have different rules, and they've, They may or may not be okay with experimental aircraft. Some of them are okay, some of them are not okay with experimental aircraft, whether we flew there or not. And so it's a lot of planning, and you don't rush it. And so I remember at one point, right. I remember at one point I was at AirVenture at Oshkosh the year before. And I went and I talked to, I'm like randomly talking to people that I've worked with before, right? Like I've got some friends that work at Garmin, and we just chat about stuff. And I was like, hey, I've got this trip coming up. Do you think you guys would want to like help me out with that? And they're like, oh yeah, let's see what we can do, right? So like Garmin paid for the databases, right, for the trip, which was fantastic, right? Like it saved me, getting America's databases with all of the charts and such is like $1,500 for the year or something. So Garmin gave us that, which was phenomenal. So saved us a bunch of money. And I talked to Continental. The plane was, I didn't plan this ahead of time, but Continental had borrowed the plane unpainted for their booth, if you will, right? Like they've got that big square of grass and the tent in Air Show Central, and the plane was sitting there. So I was like, oh, if I'm ever going to ask them for anything, it's now, right? Now that you have my airplane, maybe we can talk about something good for me.
Or I'll just fire it up and you'll have an empty booth.
Yeah. No, Continental was also fantastic. They paid for a good chunk of the fuel for the trip, and definitely provided contacts that we could use if there was ever any mechanical issues. They're like, okay, so these are our, engineering contacts in the Caribbean and in Latin America and in Brazil, right? So I had like cell phone numbers for people in case I had any sort of breakdown or anything like that. Like there would be no issues with, do I have to fly someone down here? No, there's the local guy that we know. So that was fantastic. But let's talk about the trip, right? Like, so I've talked about some of this planning. All right. So the trip, so we left, it's coming up on a year. We left, I want to say it was middle to end of February. Someone's going to correct
some random photos of this as we talk. Yeah. Let's start at the beginning. We were talking about this in the beginning. Let me start at the beginning. We're gonna get to the controversy in a second.
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of like blowing the surprise of some of the beautiful photos you sent. But
so the trip, right? So we leave and we're going. You go Wisconsin. We stop somewhere halfway between Wisconsin and Georgia to get some fuel. And then we stopped in Peachtree, Georgia, just north of Atlanta for an overnight. And then from there, all the way south to Fort Lauderdale International Airport in Florida, where we overnighted. And on the way down the coast, right, the Florida coast, we stopped at, I didn't know this, but it was like Patty Wagstaff's airport, where she does her aerobatics training.
St. Augustine area?
Yeah. I'm not terribly good with the geography.
I think it was St. Augustine because Bryon from Just Plain Silly just flew with her in her extra, and he didn't fly with her.
Okay.
But I think it was St. Augustine. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
So we stopped there for fuel, and they're like doing aerobatics above us, and I was just like, oh my gosh, did I just burst into your aerobatic airspace? And they're like, no, we just do this over the airport. I was like, okay. So we leave to go to Fort Lauderdale, and it's like, well, let's follow the coast, right? I mean, it's right there. And you sort of see on the chart coming up on the screen, it's like, Cape Canaveral is right there. And there's an airport. And there's, there's a tower, and here's a frequency. And I was like, hey, Miami Center or whichever center it was, do you mind if I just talk to Cape Canaveral Tower, or I think it was Titus Tower? Anyway, real quick. And they're like, yeah, and they'll let you. And I was like, okay, you know what I'm going to ask. All right. So, we changed frequencies and we talked to the tower, and I was like, hey, we're just flying, south towards Fort Lauderdale. We're going to pass, near you guys. A bunch of restricted airspace here. Is it okay if I do a low pass at the airport in, Kennedy Flight Center, Kennedy Space Center Airport, where the shuttle lands? And they're like, yes, absolutely. You can do as many low passes as you want. But you'll notice at the very end of the runway, we're going north to south. At the southern tip of the runway, there's an Antonov unloading spaceship parts right now. So please sidestep so that you don't like zoom directly over the Antonov, the Antonov with the nose open, unloading spaceships. Okay. It's like, yeah, I will, I'll make sure not to buzz the spaceship airplane.
That would be enough for me to turn around. Just be like, oh, done. This trip is accomplished. I want to. There are a bunch of really good, and you might be hiding some. There's really good questions for you in the chat. I want to take just a second to answer some of them. Van's Aircraft is asking. You may have said this already. How many miles round trip was, just to put in perspective for people?
Yeah. I want to say it was like, I don't remember the exact number. It was like 10 or 11,000 miles round trip, nautical miles.
It's a lot of.
So it was, it was right around 100 hours flight time, roughly half and half. We took sort of the fast way down there through the middle of Brazil, and then on the way back we went up the coast. So that was a little bit longer, but pretty close one to the other. So we did an oil change in Rio. So I flew down there. It's like, okay, 50 hours, time to do an oil change. And we were at a little flying club just outside Rio de Janeiro, and fantastic flying club. Yeah, those are my folks. Those are my parents.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
And the flying club just gave us a free hangar for the entire time we were there. We were there for 4 days. And the flying club is in sort of restricted military-ish airspace, is very close to it, but they've got a deal with the airbase next door, so that you can still fly there and you don't have to, there's no issues and all that kind of stuff. It was very, very cool. So many fun connections. I don't know if you'll see in one of the pictures coming up, they had notified local ATC that we were coming, so I started getting WhatsApp. WhatsApp is the texting app that everybody uses down there. And I got a random message from someone I didn't know, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm the center supervisor for Rio. We know you're coming. I just wanted to make sure everything is okay, and we want to make sure we know when you're going to be here so that I have the right controllers on. I was like, this is crazy. And then we landed, and I get a bunch of pictures of oh, here's the controller that was working you, and here's our view on the screen, and I was like, so cool.
Those are in this deck, and maybe I'll just go through as we go, because I think I didn't do my job, and they're not in perfect order, but yeah.
So I can talk about the pictures as they come too. So one of the things that there's a few pictures of is so when we arrived in Rio, not in Rio, in our airport of entry in Brazil, which was Boa Vista. A friend of my mother's lives in Boa Vista, and he apparently had notified the local news that there's this Brazilian guy who lives in the US who is built an airplane and is flying it to Brazil. So the news came up with this fantastic narrative of how I'm a Brazilian and I immigrated to the US, and I've always wanted to fly in Brazil. I will talk about flight flicks in just a second. I always wanted to fly in Brazil, and I built my airplane and I flew it to Brazil, and I'm coming back to my homeland to bring back aviation. And then all of the local aviators also latched onto this, and he's going to bring back general aviation to Brazil, because there was this big brouhaha going on with the local aviation authority and experimental aviation. And so the story quickly turned into, I am here to show the local aviation authority that experimental aviation is safe and should be done, and that Brazil being the birthplace of experimental aviation, we'll get to that later, should be be really making experimental aviation work in Brazil. So that's what the story became, and we were very happy that we were told we had an impact, and multiple times we would stop at an airport and people knew us, right? Like they had been following us on YouTube because we were posting videos every night of the previous day's flight, of that day's flight. So people were following along.
If I can interject, that for everyone watching tonight, that is totally worth your time. I've watched almost all of them. Really enjoy it. It feels really organic. It feels like the adventure is just the way that you did it. But you were posting so regularly as you went. Like there's a lot of really fun, just like learnings, right? Like there's sometimes when you're tired. There's sometimes when you're talking about challenges or whatever, and it just feels really. I don't know. I learned a lot watching it. It made this seem really doable. Because you were breaking it down for us. So anyway, everyone should go check those out because that's why we're talking tonight. So
and it was fun, right? Because a lot of times I do other videos on YouTube, right? Like we're building the RV10 and I'm doing that. And sometimes I'm behind, right? So like I'm trying to think back on, okay, what did I want to talk about on this video, right? Like what was interesting, what wasn't. And we made a point of releasing a video at most one day late on the trip. So every day, almost every day, there was, a video and the time lapse of the flight, right? Like you see the flight from takeoff to touchdown in a time lapse with me talking about like, what did we do here? What was interesting? What worked? What didn't? What challenges? What did we have to do to make this flight work? How did we flight plan it? Things like that. And I also did like little snippets that I call them shorts, where it's like, okay, we're walking to the airplane. Right. It's not the time lapse at the end of the day. It's we woke up, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. We're walking to the airplane and this is what's going to happen today. And like, show you around the airport or whatever, like something like that. So it was a ton of fun. And I'd love to do it again. But yeah. So this is Rio, right? So this is sort of the culmination of the trip. That is the Sugarloaf Mountain, which is the peak right in front. And in the back, you can see a little cross. And that's the Christ the Redeemer statue in Rio, which you've probably seen on TV, the James Bond, like 007 movie. I think it was it GoldenEye? I don't know. Like one of the James Bonds. The one with Ballard cutting the cable car. That was there. So you've all seen this before. And the cool thing here is, so there's the peak on the left, right? Like the very left is the Sugarloaf. I'm pointing at the screen. You guys can't see me pointing at the screen. And then on the very right of the picture, you can see the tip of the runway of the downtown Rio airport. So if you're at the top, there's a cable car that goes to the top of the Sugarloaf Peak there, and you can watch airplanes taking off straight at the Sugarloaf Peak. It's like right in the way. So if you look at the chart for takeoffs in that airport, it is take off, immediate left turn.
Oh, sure, I suppose.
Yeah. So, as a kid, I was up there. Yeah, there's us landing on it. As a kid, I was up there watching airplanes land at the little downtown. I call it the little downtown airport. I think these are two 8,000-foot runways. The little downtown airport, where with these airplanes, and thinking I would love to be in a little airplane and land there. And that's just one of those things that's always been in the back of my mind, but never really clicked until we're like, we should fly to Rio. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to fly my airplane onto that airport. And here we are.
That's amazing. I guess the closest I have to that is I grew up with American Champion aircraft that they make, the Citabrias and the Decathlons and stuff. They were like a mile away, so I saw planes doing aerobatics over my house a lot, but I didn't realize until I had moved away that the factory was like in my backyard my entire life. It's just Not as cool as your story. But anyway, you sent me a video. Is this a good time to play
Sure.
play that video? Is this the landing at that airport?
This is the landing. So we did one landing at this airport. So this is a major commercial airport in Rio, and there's like a 737 taking off and landing from there every 2 minutes, right? Like it's a major airport. And so landing fees were around $200 for this airport. So we did it once. I had to do it once, right?
Got to get it in the logbook, right?
Yeah. And they're not really set up for general aviation, right? Like it's the next smallest airplane is the one that we were parked next to, which was a Phenom, right? Like there was a Phenom parked right next to us, and that was the next smallest airplane. So we land there, and a follow me car comes up and like takes us to a little parking spot. And the guy in the follow me car is like, okay, now wait. And I was like, I can just walk to the terminal. He's like, no, wait. And a bus comes up, right? Like a bus that they use to, load people onto, you've seen like at the big airports, right? Like sometimes
Sure.
the gate's not available, so they put you in a bus to take you to the gate. Yeah, no, they showed up with a bus, and the guy's like, okay. And I was like, are you going somewhere else? He's like, no, we just came to pick you up. So Mary and I get on the bus and they take us to the terminal. It's like, okay,
That's awesome.
nice. Yeah.
And I want to give you some credit for that. I mean, if it's hard to tell, but I watched this video. Total greaser. Like you don't even like. There's no like. It's just like you can't even tell when you watch this video when your point of touchdown is. Maybe it was right there, but like when you listen to it, too, the audio's turned off here. But when you listen to it, there's like it's literally like I was like, is he down yet? So bravo, my friend.
Thank you.
It's a heist.
It's a lot of riding on your childhood. I'm sorry?
I was saying your childhood dreams are riding on that landing. You got to do it perfectly.
That's right. And I purposefully landed slightly to the left so that the runway center line was like in the middle of the camera view. No, I'm kidding. I always land left to center. There's nothing I can do about that. I've tried so many times to land on the center.
Me too. Be careful with the internet, people. They do not like that. Brian says that was a $200 bus ride.
It was, and I got the free landing at the airport of my childhood out of it.
I love it. So, so here's you on approach to there. I mean, one of the other is that airport? Yeah, still.
Yeah, that's there, and the Phenom next to us.
So pretty.
Yeah. And that was us like after we took off, I believe.
Yeah, you had to follow the chart and turn left.
That's right.
One of the questions that came up as we go through here, let me find it. Christine, Plane Lady, one of your in your building competition with your RV10 with her right now, she had a question about how long it took to plan the trip.
So it's hard to say because we've, I tend to think about things for a long time before they actually solidify in my head as like, this is something I'm going to do. It's a little bit like, yeah, it's a little bit like counting, when I'm building an airplane, right? Like you're logging your time for the build for the FAA and also for you to know how long it's taking you to do this, right? I don't count I am thinking about things and looking at the plans laying in bed at nighttime, right? Because that's just like, I'm just doing this, right? So it's just sort of the same thing I'm planning for this trip, right? Like I don't know how long it took me to plan it because I was thinking about this for, years, months, right?
Did you use paper or was this a for-flight planning? Like, how do you break something that size up?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I use SkyVector a lot for this. SkyVector was a really good way of like, okay, I'm going to do a line between these 2 points and then start rubber banding it to airports and like figure out like what works here. And part of the challenge, outside the U.S. in particular is I'm generalizing. I apologize. In particular, here you sneeze and there's an airport nearby, right? Like there's an airport everywhere, and almost every airport has fuel, right? Chances are there's going to be fuel when you land there. In a lot of other countries, Brazil in particular, we're going down the middle of the country, and the airports are 200 miles apart, and they don't all have fuel, and there's minimal information online about the airport, right? Like in the US, you can take off, and I'll admit I'll do that sometimes when I don't know what I'm going to do today. I'm going to go flying, and I'll take off and I'll start looking at like airports on the chart, and I'll touch the thing, and ADSB will give me all of this information, and I know what the weather is like there, and I know what services are available, right? Is there fuel? Is there not fuel? How much does fuel cost? That doesn't exist from what I've experienced outside the US, right? Like it's as soon as you go south of Puerto Rico, ADSB is gone. The airports don't publish any information, right? Like even getting the phone number for someone at the airport that I could call and find out, do you have fuel today? Like it's effectively like a social network of who knows the guy at this airport that runs the fuel truck. And then you get that phone number and you call him and you say, hey, I am maybe flying in tomorrow and I'm going to need, call it 25 gallons of avgas. Are you going to have 25 gallons of avgas? And when the person answers, you have to very carefully listen for their intonation of how sure do they seem that they're going to have the fuel that you need. And at least once on this trip, the person did not seem very sure. And I was like, hold on, how many gallons do you have right now? And he's like, I have about 100 gallons. I was like, okay, I'm not going to risk this because if 310 shows up before me, you're out of fuel, right? And then what am I going to do? Because the next airport is 200 miles that way. And may also not have fuel. So every single day, like as part of the trip planning is, okay, I've got this planned out route, right? But the day before, I'm going to call that airport and ask him, do you have fuel? How much fuel do you have? Any issues with the airport today, right? Like, is the airport closed? Are we good? I want to say once we had to reroute, and before we took off, we discovered that the airport we were going to stop at didn't have fuel, and because there isn't as much information easily accessible in the U.S., right? You can't just Google for the Wikipedia page or the AirNav page for this airport and then have all the phone number and the runway lengths and the condition and all this kind of stuff. That doesn't exist. So one of the things I did was I got in touch with the AOPA Brazil chapter, and I said, hey, I'm doing this, help. And I like a day later, I got invited to this WhatsApp group with like 20 other people in it. And they're like, oh, hey, we formed this WhatsApp group so that you would have someone you could talk to throughout the trip to ask questions. And, we know all the contacts, right? And the things like that. And the other thing is, so you guys may have noticed we stayed at a flying club outside Rio out there. It's a private flying club, fantastic place. And one of the members reached out to me and he's like, I am a commercial pilot. I fly 767s to Portugal or whatever. I think Portugal, like big airplanes. And I'm based out of there. And I am off that week, those 2 weeks the down part of the southern way of the trip. I am available and I will be monitoring my phone and I will give you METARs and I will give you everything you need.
Oh, that's amazing.
Right. Like, so he was fantastic. And we had an inReach, like one of the little Garmin satellite communicators in the plane. And we basically text messaged him from like in the air, like over the ocean. I would text him and say, hey, I can't talk to anybody on the radio right now. We're in between centers and whatever. Can you tell me what the METAR is for this airport coming up and maybe this other airport? And he would just like 5 minutes later, I would have the METAR and the TAF, and he would say, hey, and I've called the airports, these two airports as well, and everybody has fuel and you're good. So the community was fantastic, right? And it's like it is here. But I never thought I would lean so hard on the community for this trip to work, right? Being not a local flyer, I didn't know these things, and everybody like pulled out all the stops to make it work. It was fantastic. It was
That's
just
because
absolutely...
you were gonna save aviation in
That's
Brazil.
Right.
I was just thinking to myself, I was gonna make a joke about how I was like, I can't call anyone while I'm flying and get a METAR, but that's false. I do have a community of people that do that, and they've actually helped me with like weather and risk management and stuff when I've been like on the ground with like a rain shower coming and I'm like, should I do this? And we like have a little conference while I'm like on the taxiway.
Yeah, I did this week, right? Like every time I'm not sure and I feel like I'm getting a little bit of get-theritis, I stop and I call someone and I say, I'm thinking about doing this. Tell me if I'm stupid.
Right.
Because I know as a human being, I have the propensity of, underappreciating the risk of something if I want to do it. So I need somebody else to tell me if it's reasonable.
Absolutely. You know what is also unreasonable is we're almost out of time, and I'm just gonna start clicking through. I'm gonna start clicking through some of these photos. This is one you said was funny, worth mentioning. So maybe you want to tell that story, and you've got beautiful photos, and if there's one you want to talk about, just holler out stop. But this was a funny story.
I'm totally gonna start a flame war here. So
that's cool with me.
So different countries have different perspectives on the history of aviation. Wow, was that sufficiently different perspectives on the history of aviation?
Yeah, that was very diplomatic of you.
Yeah, in the United States, our claim to fame is that the Wright brothers were first in flight. In Brazil, it's Alberto Santos Dumont.
Oh, it's not this
which
guy.
is this guy.
Wait, I don't know. See, I don't know what that. I can't read.
It says father of aviation.
Oh, that makes sense. All right. Oh yeah. I see his name's up in the signature up on the.
The smudge on the top is 14 bis, which is the name of his airplane that was the first airplane to fly. Okay, I said it. So, I mean, and there's a lot, there's other countries have similar, claims to the first in aviation, and different countries claim it for different reasons, right? Like some of them say things like, yes, the Wright brothers were the first ones to, let's hold this one, the first ones to take off, but they were catapulted and, like they weren't able to reproduce that for so many weeks or months or whatever, blah, 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 right? Like there's always a reason, right? Like, for why country X believes they were first. Brazil believes it was Alberto Santos Dumont, and they have his picture at most, if not all, of the airports. And once we noticed this, we just started taking pictures of the picture. So I've got a catalog of Alberto Santos Dumont portraits. So this picture, this is actually from a news station that Balanço Geral RJ. I don't know which news station this is, but this thing got big enough in Brazil that like major national television had this in like the 8 o'clock news, right? Like it was, we were landing places and there were news crews there that we had no idea. They were just there, right? That they were tracking us and, we were there. So this is a still from TV and of us landing at the Santos Dumont Airport in Rio, right? The main airport we landed at. And this lady tweeted about this picture, and I will terribly translate this. It says, good grief, I wouldn't be in that thing if you paid me to. And I was like, this is just a perfect shot, right? Like it was like So some people were excited and some people were just terrified by the idea of flying in a tiny little airplane across the country. Oh boy.
I love that.
One of the people on the chat just asked how many days we took. So we took 4 weeks for the whole trip. It was roughly a little over a week and a half plus on the way down. We stayed in Rio for I think 4 days. My folks live in Rio, so we stayed there for 4 days, and then we took about 2 weeks to get home. I could easily have done this trip over 6 months because there was so much to see and so much going on. And it was phenomenal, just absolutely gorgeous and fantastic. And everywhere we stopped, it was like a different experience, right? I mean, we're flying over the Amazon. Like there'll be a picture or two of flying over the Amazon. Here, right? Like we landed at this airport and they were expecting us. And I was like, what is going on?
Hey, guys.
Like we stopped and we're chatting and, like I'm talking to people and there's a there's a camera crew that shows up and then the weather turns and they're like, oh, well, I guess you're going to be spending the night. And I was like, I guess I am.
Frogs.
Tiny little frogs. This was another airport along the way. This was the only time so there was one diversion. And then there was one, we're returning and going back. And this was we're returning and going back. One of the things we learned is you don't fly in the Amazon region in the afternoon because the humidity spikes and then the clouds just like, it's incredible. It goes from like 10 a.m. onwards. You basically should not be in the air because it's like huge cumulonimbus after huge cumulonimbus. And, they go from, 3,000 feet to 40,000 feet, right? Like they're humongous, and you can see them growing throughout the morning. Like you can tell they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you can see, like, if you watch some of the morning time lapses on this trip, you can tell, right? Like, oh, there's no clouds. Oh, there's little clouds. Oh, the clouds are getting bigger. Oh, they're getting puffier. Oh, So this was one afternoon where we landed there and we're like, oh, we can keep going. And we take off and we fly for maybe a half hour and we're like, nope, we're going back. We know that airport is good. We're going to turn 180 here and we're going to go land there. Yay, Santos Dumont.
There he is again.
The previous pick was we rolled over 500 hours total time on our RV over the Amazon River, which was awesome. And
that's super cool.
Yeah, and that was roughly just over like 18 months, 19 months of flying. We had 500 hours on it, which was phenomenal. We love that plane.
You guys use it.
Yeah, and this might be actually the only picture I've ever taken of that screen where it's not covered in fingerprints and smudges, so it just worked out, right? Like it was meant to be.
There he is again.
Hey, and the smudge on the top left.
I like that.
So there's a few of those. This is leaving Brazilian airspace. Jamal is the GPS fix at the border for this route that they want us to report over Jamal, which is basically report you have now exited Brazilian airspace. The funny thing is, it's the same thing on the way in, right? Like you're supposed to report over Jamal and talk to Amazonica Center before crossing Jamal and all this kind of stuff. But the thing is, there's no radio relay over there, right? So I forget the Guyana. It's not Guyana Center. It's whatever the center is over Guyana. You're like 30 miles from the Brazilian border, and they say contact Amazonica Center on one blah 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 backup one blah 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 blah. But the thing is, I can't reach them, right? Like I'm flying at 12,000 feet, 10,000 feet, and my radio just does not reach an Amazonica Center tower. So we're getting closer and getting closer and getting closer, and they're still not talking to us, right? And then we're like, okay, we've crossed the border. And maybe 10 minutes later, they're like, oh, yeah, now we can hear you. I crossed the border over Jamal 10 minutes ago. And they're like, yeah, no, we saw you. You're good.
They're like, oh, the fighters.
Right, yeah. Because I was told repeatedly by people before, it's like, do not cross the Brazilian border, A, without a flight plan, or B, without talking to them. And these are big legs, right? I mean, this leg from, I think it was Guyana to Boa Vista was a 3-hour leg, and there is not an airport in between, right? There is a place for there's a few places for emergency landings that we could have made in between. That we, like, yes, you could probably get the airplane out of here kind of thing, but not a place that we could land and get fuel and continue. So, you took off and you make it to the border and you're committed. So I was not going to turn around. Like if the jets came up, if the fighters came up, I was going to rock my wings and follow them to Brazil.
I love it. That would have been a good video too. It's definitely just like, look at how beautiful.
Oh, that's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. This is the Bahamas. This was one of the first few views that we saw exiting Florida. And it was just absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, this is arriving back in the U.S. That's the Florida coast, probably Fort Lauderdale area. And but one of the things that I like telling people is, so this was a big trip, right? Like this is huge. Humongous trip. It was a big deal, right? Like it's a lot of planning. It's a lot of time, right? Like I managed to convince my work to give me a month off to do this. But flying to the Caribbean, flying to the Bahamas is easy, and you should do it, right? Because it's so easy. Like in an RV, okay, not everybody has an RV, but in an RV, right, I'm doing 150 knots. I can make it to Georgia in a day, no problem, right? Like it's a 4-hour flight to Atlanta from Madison. So you can make it to Atlanta. You can keep going if you want and make it all the way to Florida. So when we flew back from Sun and Fun to Madison, I did it in one day, right? Like I had a little bit of tailwind, but still, it was like I'm not exhausted, right? Like it was a 6, 7, 8 hours of flying or something like that. So it's tiring, but it's totally doable, right?
This is a very frustrating conversation.
Very you should build an airplane.
Right? Yeah, I know. You and everyone else wants me to build an airplane. All right, keep going. Sorry, we should all go to Bahamas.
So you can make it. Okay, so you can make it to Florida in 2 days, right? So this is normal flying. It's a long cross country, but it's not. Nothing's difficult about it. Nothing is different about it, right? Like it's you can do the whole thing without talking to anybody on the radio if you want to, right? Like it's doable. I'm a big proponent of talking to ATC because 100% of the time that I've worked with ATC, they have been helpful to me. But you don't have to. You can do this, in non-controlled airspace and make it all the way to Florida in 2 days. And then you get to Florida and you can be in the Bahamas, depending on where you want to go, you can be in the Bahamas in under an hour fairly easily. If you want to go to sort of the normal islands, like the usual islands that people go to, I want to say it was 2 hours. It took us 2 hours from Fort Lauderdale to Stella Maris, and you get there and they're happy to see you, right? Like the customs people are not going to hassle you. They joke with you. They don't even want to look at your airplane. They want you to fill out paperwork, and that's it, right? And there's a couple of fees, and the fees aren't crazy, right? Everybody speaks English. There's nothing complicated about it. It's easy and it's phenomenal, and you should be doing it every year. You really should. It is worth doing, and we would be doing it right now. This was my plan when we got back. Was we were going to do a build, fly, go to the Bahamas with a bunch of people, right? Like I was going to invite everybody on the channel and say, rent an airplane, borrow an airplane, steal an airplane, come with us to the Bahamas. Don't steal my airplane. And because it's just so easy. And hopefully we'll get to do it next spring. Like I'm hoping, it looks like it'll be good.
Yeah. If we'll get poked.
Yeah.
I can't say that joke. I hope everyone's okay. I think we should just keep. We're a little bit over time, but I want to keep going because there's so many other interesting things that we could learn from here. Like this, I'm assuming different registration numbers required in different countries type deal.
Right. So experimental aircraft in the U.S. and other specific categories of aircraft don't need 12-inch N numbers. But if you're crossing an ADIZ, which is an air defense identification zone, I might have just made that up. It's basically a U.S. border airspace, you have to have 12-inch end numbers. Additionally, other countries also require 12-inch end numbers. It is not the case that I'm aware of that there is a country that says you cannot have 12-inch end numbers, right? So the safe thing to do is go to your local vinyl cutting place and have them cut like vinyl end numbers for you, 12 inches, and just stick them on the side of your airplane. And Evoke, Plane Schemers, I told them I was going to, okay, do you guys have a vinyl cutter? And they're like, yeah. So they cut me end numbers. And this is when we arrived back at Evoke, because it's on the way, right? And I was like, oh, hey, can you just like look at this little fuel stain that I got on the wing? And I was like, well, while the airplane is getting looked at, I'm going to peel these 12-inch end numbers anymore so that I can become anonymous again. Honestly, it's sort of hard to be anonymous with the airplane with that paint job. Once or twice, random people are like, oh, I think I've seen that before, and I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's my first time here.
Well, there is a Sonics aircraft that also has a hex paint scheme that's a little famous in the Sonics forums, and they call it Sexy Hexy.
Oh,
so there's at least two of you.
Yeah, don't call mine that. So back up real quick. That picture is so we landed in Gadsden, where Evoke Aviation is, right? Because I just wanted them to look at this because I had like brand new paint, right? The paint at this point is a month old. We picked up the plane in Gadsden and then flew to Brazil. And one of the FBOs in Puerto Rico had spilled fuel on the wing, filling it up, and then just shoved it in the hangar and just let it sit. So I had a huge fuel stain on a 2-week-old, at that point, right, when it stained, paint job. So I immediately called Evoke, and I talked to them about it. And they're like, just stop here on the way and we'll take care of it and we'll look at it. So we stopped and I pull up and I point out the thing, and like he gets a buffer out and he starts cleaning it. And then suddenly 4 other guys come out of nowhere and they start detailing the airplane. And I was just like, no, guys, like, you're busy. I just wanted you to look at this. And he's like, no, you're here. Let's detail the airplane. I was like, okay, thank you. So they got all the grime off the plane from the trip at the end, which was fantastic.
Well, obviously they're proud of their work too, right? Like, look at that thing.
So FlightFlix posted early on, and I have actually had this question numerous times by people, is how do I mount my cameras on the plane? So the inside camera is obvious, right? Like, it's just a stuck-on like GoPro mount. The one up on the tail is actually a custom mount that I bought parts from FlightFlix for, right? Like, I needed specific parts. And I worked with him on like, okay, this is what I want to make. This is what I want to do. And he sent me these parts that I then made a plate that like was shaped at the airfoil shape of the vertical stabilizer that mounted to his attachment. Right. So talk to like, if you're looking for help with mounting stuff to airplanes, the FlightFlix guys are awesome. And I'll be honest, they gave me those parts at cost. So, sponsorship alert or whatever you want to call it. But I wouldn't talk about it if it wasn't, awesome and hadn't worked for me, right? Like I have been given other things by other people who wanted me to talk about them, and I don't. So that when I talk about something, it's because I liked it.
Rock on, man. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those things that I think about a lot as a aspiring YouTuber, is like, how do I is particularly with experimental aircraft where you can do that, right? Like, you can modify it and integrate a mount. Like, that is kind of the dream, right? And then I think about like faster aircraft like an RV where look at you guys, you're so cute flying around in your plane, where you don't want to necessarily, like, because the way the experimental rules work, and you don't necessarily want that additional drag out in the wind, you can actually integrate something and make it a little bit cleaner. Is really cool. So that's cool that they supported you in that, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, they were awesome. Can we back up one real quick?
Yeah.
So notice that we're wearing life vests in this. Um, I have seen so many people that are flying over water of, reasonable size, right? Like if you're going to fly over Lake Michigan, which I personally don't in a single engine airplane, but um, and they tell me, oh, it's okay, I have life jackets. And I was like, yeah, but you're not wearing the life jackets. Wear the life, like if you're going to fly over water, wear the life jacket because you're going to be too busy flying the airplane. Like if something happens, you're going to be too busy flying the airplane to put it on. It's not going to be any good in the back of the plane.
No, that's
So
true.
if, yeah, so and these like inflatable ones, right? They're not uncomfortable. Like we wore those for 30 hours, 40 hours of flying time, right? Like throughout the entire Bahamas section, like basically once we left Florida and all the way to when we got to South America, we were wearing them. So it was like 20 hours or so, 20, 30 hours. And they're fine. They're comfortable. It's, wear it.
We have a similar style that we wear on my dad's sailboat.
Uh-huh.
And I actually, the first thing I thought was like, oh, I could totally wear this in the cockpit. It
Yeah.
feels like doable, right? Like,
Yeah. So here is okay. So this is an interesting one. If you look, the Mikey Yankee Bravo Sierra is, I believe it's Bimini or something like that. It's one of it's the closest island in the Bahamas to Florida. And if you look at the scale on the very bottom right of that picture, it shows 12 nautical miles. So like sort of extrapolate that. So that MYBS is, I don't know, like 80 miles from the coast, something like that, right? Like I'm making that up, but like measure that's not far, right? Like in a fast airplane, that's 40 minutes. And this is heavily traveled waters, right? So it's one of the things I did when we were preparing for this was Mary and I both went to the FAA's emergency egress ditch class, which I should have sent you pictures. You can see pictures of that on the Instagram. So they did like shove you into the pool, do the roll cage, right? Like
oh,
inflate
sure.
the thing. But one of the things that I found to be really helpful was, you got access to other people taking the class, and including people who were like search and rescue flyers and like things like that. And I asked them, it's like, so what do I need safety gear for this trip, right? Like, what is it that um, you need? And he said, wear a life jacket, right? Like a life vest, an inflatable one, which I've mentioned already. Have that like on you. And the other thing he said is, don't assume that anything that is not physically attached to you is going to be available to you if you have to ditch, right? Like plan on being able to survive in the water with only the things that are like physically tied to you or like in zippered pockets or things like that. Um, and one of those things should be each person should have a personal locator beacon, a PLB, because if you have one, are you going to do like tic-tac-toe over who gets rescued? Right? Like who's going to have this PLB in their pocket, right?
Mm-hmm.
So two-person airplane, that's two PLBs. And you can rent them if you don't want to buy them. They're not expensive to rent, or you can buy them because you're doing this big trip, right? Like it's honestly, it's a small coin in that bucket of fuel costs and landing fees and
Absolutely.
um,
No, I mean that's a huge one, and there have been documented on YouTube uh, accidents where people didn't, were maybe not as remote as you were going over the Amazon and things like that, where people were still remote, like many hours away by car from the nearest rescue services, and they didn't have those PLBs, and they're like getting in the airplane to climb up to get cell service or whatever to try to facilitate a rescue. So I think that's
right.
huge. The other one I was gonna say that I just saw, just since we're talking safety, on Reddit, I saw a post from Britain, and they're recommending to boaters and like kayakers and stuff. They're actually giving them away now, these waterproof bags for cell phones, because if you're operating even just within a few miles of the coast, you can still get cell service. If you have a waterproof bag, your phone won't die. And they have this what is it, 999 or whatever in Great Britain, where it's like the kid calls and he's like, I don't know, I'm like out in the ocean. Like I got swept out. I'm like in my life jacket and I'm here and I'm freaking out and I don't know how to get back. And they're like, first of all, you're gonna float because you're wearing the life jacket, and second of all, you got your cell phone. And then like a lifeboat comes out and grabs him. So that was the other thing. Like the thing you just said about like what's on you. I'm not a survival expert, but like that, those situations, as we hear about it and we analyze it as pilots, like that over and over again gets demonstrated. So I think that's huge advice.
Yeah. So I guess back to, like we've talked about this, oh my gosh, these terrible things could happen to you. But again, this is Bahamas, right? Like I'm telling you, go to the Bahamas, because those are incredibly heavily trafficked waters. And that was one of the jokes that the search and rescue guy made to me was, by the time you hit the water, like if you're going to hit the water in an airplane, like in between the U.S. and the Bahamas, right, which is the longest stretch while you're flying over the Bahamas, chances are the Coast Guard is going to beat you to the spot because there are so many boats there, right? They're not there looking for you, but they just happen to be there if you need them. So that was one of the jokes, was it's like, you're going to be in the water for 2 hours tops, right? And that's if you don't float towards an island and just like get out of the water yourself. so yeah, the Bahamas is not difficult, right? Like, be safe, plan your flights, but yeah, let's all fly to the Bahamas. This is Dominican Republic.
There you go.
Incredibly easy and very close to the Bahamas. And it was we spent 3 days at this resort because we got there. It was an overnight stop, and like we saw this and we're like, let's add a couple extra nights here.
That's the other cool thing about flying your own plane.
Yeah.
You just stay there.
Right. You see something cool in the distance and you go do it, right? Like it's that easy. It's that cool. I want to say this is Boa Vista. This is actually our airport of entry in Brazil. It's as I've mentioned, right? The aviation infrastructure in other countries is very different from what it is in the U.S. This is a major airport in Brazil. It's the state capital of Roraima, which is a northernmost state, and it's got one runway, right? I mean, it's one thousands foot long runway, very big runway, but it's one runway, which is the most common thing for you to see in that we saw in the Caribbean and in Brazil. It is rare for there to be more than one runway, right? Like it's not like in the US where every little regional airport around the corner has two runways. So that was one of those things where it's like
crosswind practice.
Yeah, and so you got to put yourself in that place in your head where it's like, no, I'm, like, this is where I'm going to land, right? Like, I don't care that it's gusting 30 knots, right? Like, this is it. We're landing here. And as soon as you put yourself in that mental space, it doesn't matter anymore, right? Like, yeah, we're landing here. It's going to be awesome.
I love that.
Yeah, we did a lot of big sunrises, right? Like this, where we got to the airport before sunrise, especially in the northern parts of Brazil where you can only fly in the mornings. We'd get there at 5 a.m. We'd get the plane ready. This is Boa Vista again. It's just a gorgeous town. We'd get there, and it's an architected town as well, right? So like the design was like made, and then they,
filled it in.
Yeah. And that's the airport at the end. You can see just at the very top of the image. What was I saying? So yeah, you get up, you go get the plane ready, and then you fly until like noon o'clock-ish or something like that. And then you're somewhere new and different, and you're in the Amazon, and you go to this jungle hotel, and there's like toucans, in your room or something like that, right? Like it's incredible. This is the coolest thing about aviation for me is you're discovering, like, everywhere you go it's different and you're discovering something. And this is the Amazon rainforest, right? So these are trees for as far as the eye can see, and they look like trees, right? It's green, it looks sort of grassy, but these trees are, like 100 feet tall, right? Like that canopy is 100 feet off the ground, and the trunks of those trees are like what, like 4 feet diameter, 5 feet, 6 feet. So you're not landing in that.
You're getting to do research in the canopy like I learned about in grade school.
Yeah, right. Like
And then
it's
getting eaten by a snake.
This is the Amazon River. This is where the Rio Branco and the Rio Negro merge, right? The Rio Branco is the white river, and the black river, they merge, and then they become the Amazon River. And this is just south of Manaus, which is the sort of the main port town in the sort of upriver in the Amazon. And like these are things that I learned about in like grade school, right? Like, and the White River merges with the Black River, and it becomes the Amazon. And I was like, yeah, there's a picture of that. I was there.
That's awesome. I read about this in a book. That was my wife in when we went to Paris. She's an art historian, and she was like, "Look, I've seen this in books."
Yeah.
That,
there's a couple of mentions of night flight over the Amazon. Yeah, don't do it. We only did, that I remember, one night landing, and it was into a major airport with RNAVs and like, ILS approaches and things like that. And it was just after sunset in a major town. We promised ourselves we're not doing any IFR flying on this trip, right? Like this is a vacation. We're not going to be in the clouds. And we're not flying at night because there's not a lot of backups, right? Like when the airports are, 200 miles apart, you don't get a lot of chances. This was the second. I remember I mentioned that there was one turnaround that we did and one diversion. This was our diversion. So we are flying to, I forget the name of the town, and I forget the name of this airport. We're flying to this airport. It's our last stop before getting to Rio. And the weather forecast was wrong. And we're above the clouds, and it is solid overcast. And this airport the airport we're going into has no instrument approaches. And there is no way that I am, like in hilly Brazilian country, there is no way that I'm flying through those clouds without like talking to a controller that tells me obstacle clearance, or like knowing I'm on an instrument approach. So
sure.
would not, at this point we're like, okay, I'm watching my fuel and I'm going, what's our plan here? And I'm doing sort of the math in my head as we're circling over the airport, in the overcast, right? Like I'm talking to people on CTAF down at the airport, like trying to figure out, like, do they see sunlight through anything? And they're like, it looks okay over here, but we don't really see any sunlight, but it doesn't look very thick. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going through this. So this was our alternate. We actually filed alternates on all of our flight plans because I wanted to pre-think where I was going to go, right? Like I didn't want to be thinking about this when things are going sideways.
That's huge.
And this was the alternate. And this alternate was a major, I'm calling this a major airport. This was a major airport for Brazil. No, back up, not that one yet. Brazil. And there's no avgas there, and I knew there was no avgas there. There's only jet. But so quickly did the math in my head, and I was like, okay, we're going to divert. We're going to fly there, and I'm going to declare an emergency if I have to. But I'm going to do, an instrument approach on a VFR flight plan because that's all I've got, right? So I called. I couldn't reach center, of course, but there is a tower. It wasn't actually a tower; it's a radio controller. The guy he isn't an ATC person, but he gives clearances at the airport. It's sort of a weird thing. So I called him. I was like, I'm on a VFR flight plan. I am capable and equipped for IFR, and I need to do an RNAV on RNAV runway, blah, blah, blah over there. And he's like, absolutely. There's an airliner in front of you. He's going to be on the ground before you, report over, fix, blah, blah, blah. And we did. And we did the RNAV runway, whatever runway it was, and landed. And I remember telling, like, as soon as we landed, I remember telling Mary, so I'm either going to get yelled at here for like flying, into IMC on a VFR flight plan, or I don't know what's going to happen. You stay in the airplane. So we taxied up to effectively just to the left of that Guil Airlines. I think that's a 7-3. Just to the left of him. And some guy comes out and he's like, they want to talk to you inside. And I was like, okay, here we go. And I go inside and like as soon as the door opens and the guy is there, I stick my hand out and shake his hand. And I say, thank you. We were in a bind and we needed to land here. And, thanks for helping us. And he's like, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. And I was like, oh, good. I'm not going to get yelled at. But he's like, okay, but now you need to go into the other room and pay your landing fee. And I was like, oh, great.
Uh-oh.
It was about $100.
Oh, that's not.
For Save My Bacon landing fee, I was happy to pay $100, right? Like, no big deal. And then maybe an hour after, everything starts opening up and we're good. And we had enough fuel with reserves to make it to the other airport, which was only like 20 minutes away, right? It wasn't far. But it was like enough fuel with reserves to make it there just. So we made it there, and it's a good story. It's a fun trip.
That is a good story.
So the next picture.
Yeah, this is a different kind of airport.
So this is the flying club that we stayed at, and honestly, you might have seen me post this on Instagram. This place is a little piece of heaven. I don't even know what to say, right? Like, please go look at the pictures of this flying club on Instagram that we've posted. It's a 2,500-foot runway with a hill on the end of it, but it's wide enough, it's long enough, right? We can land these airplanes in less than 1,000 feet, right? Like, it's not a big deal. It's just I'm not used to landing this airplane with a hill on the end of it. And having to actually brake, right? Like, I'm based out of Dane County Airport, where I don't brake. The airplane just comes to a stop at foot 5,000 or whatever, right? Like, save my expensive brake pads. But this place is just phenomenal, right? Like, there's this great clubhouse, like tons of hangar space, and they were so nice, so nice. Just I can't say enough nice things about them. It's Céu Flying Club. It's west of Rio, and if you're ever in Brazil and you want to fly an airplane, there's a flight school based out of there, and they will take you flying.
That's amazing. I want to go to there.
Yeah. And then you'll sit drinking beers when you're done with your flight, watching airplanes land. Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, right? Like the ATC people at Rio Center, or Rio Approach, I think is what it was, were following us, and they sent us pictures of us on the chart. You can see near the center on the right, the pink dot, November 689 Romeo Victor. So they sent us a bunch of pictures of us on on their screens, and they sent us pictures of the controllers like giving us thumbs up, right, with us on the screen, and it was just great people, very helpful.
You think that happened to you more than once?
Yeah. Yeah.
Love it. Dude, this is just like, I guess
look at that. Oh my gosh. That's the club.
Oh, that's so cool. So, 72 Papa says, drink beer after a flight? I've never heard of such a thing.
Does not happen.
So I want to, I think we got a couple more photos I'll click through. Oh, here we go. Yeah, you made the newspaper, man.
This is O Globo. This is the major national newspaper.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Like, everybody likes the story, so they wanted to talk about it. Okay.
Is this the flying club? They got hammocks?
That's the flying club. Yeah, that's the runway on the right. So you sit in a hammock watching airplanes take off and land on the runway.
Oh,
how cool is that?
Oh, man. I'm really frustrated with you now.
Yep, and that's us landing at the flying club. So cool. I think this was the second day. So we, on our first landing there, as we were arriving in Brazil, right? Like, it's probably the tightest landing we were going to do on that trip, right? It was like 2,400 feet or whatever, right? It's not tight at all, but we had been flying for 6 hours that day already. I'm tired. The airplane is pretty close to it's somewhat rear CG. So the sight picture is a little different from usual, right? I mean, Yeah, granted, I had just gotten 50 hours worth of flying that airplane like that. But it's not my, I'm not used to flying that airplane heavy and the CG a little rear and things like that. So a 2,500-foot runway with a hill on the end is a little tighter than, there was a little bit of a pucker going on.
Sure.
So the first time we touched down, I was like, no, I'm going too fast. This is a touch and go, right? So I shoved the throttle forward, took off, right? Like the RV has plenty of takeoff and go. So I had no issues there. And I remember, and we came back around and I was like, okay, I'm just going to slow myself down a little further. And, we're going to, do it a little slower. And it was fine. And, no big deals. And I remember when we pulled off and like our host at the flying club was like, you easily could have made the first turnoff. And I was like, yeah, I'm just not, like first time landing here, a little stressed, I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so the next day we come back to the flying club because, like it's the coolest place to be. Right. And we come back to the flying club and one of the guys that I had just like randomly chatted with, he's a flight instructor and he's like, why don't we go fly? Like we're all just sitting, like everybody's drinking beer. I wasn't drinking at all that day because I wanted to fly and I didn't know when I was going to fly. So I just decided I'm just not going to drink. And he's just like, why don't we just go fly? Like, let's go fly. I instruct here at this field. So we're going to go do touch and goes until you're happy. And I was like, this is awesome. So I just spent the next 2 hours just like doing touch and goes with him and then flying like in the local airspace and looking at the islands nearby. And I came back and, like I made a friend that I still reach out to and talk to today. And, the guy is fantastic. And there's a rumor going around that my mom is going to learn to fly with him once the pandemic is over.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Get it, Mom.
That's right. And, and it's just like these people that you meet and that, like want to spend their valuable time, giving it to you, right? Like giving you their time and, spending time with you and sharing their knowledge and experience is just such a fantastic thing about general aviation, right? About this community we have. It's, yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's and there's also like a global community thing that seems to be happening, right? Like I think you've mentioned a number of times tonight that you were amazed and impressed by all the support that you were getting from total strangers on the ground who just wanted to make sure you were safe and having a good time. That's
absolutely,
that's incredible too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and like we would land a place where we, like we don't have any connections here, right? Like this is just the airport we're landing at. And the guy from the tower would come down and he's like, hey, I heard about your trip. Like, we were really happy that you came here. Like, do you need a car? Do you need restaurant recommendations? Are you staying somewhere? Like, do you need to know where to go? Like, how can we help? And it was just like people are coming out of the woodwork to help us, right? Like aviation people are just, it's incredible.
I love it. I love the sky. I keep saying it's like #SkyFam, and I love that this story is part of that. So okay, so we're way over, which no one seems to mind. Everyone's still here. I have one question for you, and that is if you had to give me or the folks in the audience 3 little tips about doing a giant trip like this. We talked about safety, and maybe the safety equipment thing maybe is one. What are the other 2 like pieces of advice that you have for folks if they want to bite something like this off?
Yeah. So the safety thing is figure out what the risk factors are and mitigate them, right? In this trip in particular, the main risk factors were off airport landings, and being sure that we knew how to handle that. And of course, landing on airports with no fuel, right? So being sure you can mitigate that. The other thing is a lot of these trips are not hard, right? Like a lot of this stuff is approachable, right? The usual, for me, right, the bucket list items for aviating, the normal, right, not the flying to Brazil bucket list items, the normal bucket list items are, I want to flow to the Caribbean and I want to flow to Alaska, right? Like those are the 2 obvious ones. That is easy, right? The hardest thing there is finding time off of work.
Right.
It's, like everybody speaks English. These are all like systems that you have played in before, right? Like calling ATC and talking to ATC and filing a flight plan, on your tablet or over the phone, or, at the FBO filing the flight plan on paper with someone helping you, right? Like, this is all stuff that you can do. Go do it. And I think the third one is, like, if you're feeling really weird about this, find a buddy to do it with, right? Those two bucket list items are, I've heard half the aviation people I know tell me, oh, I want to fly to Alaska and I want to fly to the Bahamas, right? So
Right.
somebody else sitting next to you probably wants to fly to Alaska or the Bahamas. And it's cooler to do this in groups, right? So take 2 airplanes and go to the Caribbean and go enjoy the warm weather, right? It's cold here. Enjoy the warm weather.
Well, while you've been explaining this in the chat, I think we decided that after the pandemic is over, the SuperAero fly-in will be in the Bahamas, and we will probably need to hire you as our concierge, who's done it, our
So,
intrepid leader to get us there safely, since you've done it before.
we'll make it the SuperAero / Build Fly Go trip to
Oh,
the
I guess
Bahamas.
that's fine. I guess that's fine.
I need some marketing out of this too.
Yeah. Of course. Fine.
Absolutely. It's an easy trip, and it's a trip that I am happy to help people do, right? As long as I get to go as well. I'm happy to help people do. And I want to do it again, right? Like, as soon as things are a little more normal, but middle to the end of this year or early next year or whenever, right? Like, we're going to go. We're going to do this.
Dude, that'll be great, except you'll have to just throttle way back for all the Cessnas.
No, I'll just have had a beer or two by the time you get there. That's all.
I don't know if we have time for short final. It's a game we play on the show. It's only a minute. Let's do it before we wrap up. Are you okay with that? It's
Sure.
late where you are now. We've been on the thing for a long time.
I got nothing going on. This is it.
You got to go up those luxury stairs. All right, Guil, let's play a little game. Just quick answers, no points, all the points, however you want to think about it. All right, Guil, you flew on a dream. Your channel is called. I've totally for Build Fly Go. Nope, none of this is working. Starting over. Your dream hangar. My segue was horrible. If your dream hangar, three airplanes. I've wasted 20 seconds. What's your top 3 airplanes if you could have them in your hangar?
Oh, top 3 airplane. Definitely an RV. I love the RV9. It is so incredibly efficient. I can't talk about that enough. How incredibly efficient the RV9 is. With that engine, I love the IO 340. It's phenomenal for that airplane. Then I would do something like a kit box or a cub craft, or like a carbon cub. I think I'd like a carbon cub. That would be fun. And then I would say a Cessna Caravan on floats.
You just made at least one big friend in the chat. I am sorry, I blew your time, like verbal marbles in my mouth. I don't know what happened. I got totally mixed up with my my transitions. Okay, I got a couple more for you real quick.
Yeah.
Are you a track up or north up guy?
North up. No, wait, track up. Sorry, track up. Mostly because some people can do that conversion in their head, like, without thinking, right? Like, I can't.
Yeah.
Like, if I am a north up, like, I have to, like, move my head and think about, okay, so the airplane is actually pointing this way on the chart, so this is what I need to do. So track up.
I'm a north up guy, but there's definitely internet proof of them saying, like, hey, you've got traffic 3 o'clock, and me looking the other way because I'm looking at the map wrong, right? One other one, just curious, I'm going to ask you favorite passenger, but I think I already know.
Oh, it's definitely Mary. Yeah.
Gotta be,
because
right?
he's also a pilot, so I can take a nap.
We didn't even talk about that. That's amazing. That helps. Uh, what's the other? Let's say other than the Brazil flight, coolest thing you've ever done in an airplane?
So I think like the cool things for me in an airplane are doing something new, right? I think like when so Steve Flight Chops had his he had a fly-in up out in his airport at the Canadian Historical Aircraft Association airport in Canada outside Detroit. I forget the name of the airport. He had the fly-in, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll fly up there." Right? Like it's 2 hours because I have to go around the bottom of Lake Michigan to get up there in the RV. And it was okay. So it was my first time doing an international trip, so I had to learn how to do the CBP thing and do the website and buy the sticker and like figure out okay, I need a radio station license and I need a restricted radio telephone operator's license. Right? So like figuring out how to do these things and doing something new is really what makes me tick, right? Like it's Windsor. Yes, thank you, Jason. Windsor Airport. So, and the other thing is, I love how people say RVs are a flying carpet, magical flying carpet. But I think in general aviation opens things up for us incredibly. An example is my brother-in-law, my wife's little brother, lives west of Minneapolis, right? Like on the west side, outside the Bravo in Minneapolis. It is, I think, a 5 or 6 hour drive from our home to there. In the RV, it's an hour and a half flight, door to door. So
Yeah,
we can go there, have lunch, and come back and not be tired, right? Like it's incredible.
that's
I
the. I
never.
mean, that weirdly never gets old. I think the thing I always tell people about is from Milwaukee up to the northern part of Wisconsin. There's I don't know exactly where it is, where it goes from being like Wisconsin to being like up north, right? Where you're like up in the North Woods. And when you like
Mhm.
land in Door County, it feels like you're in a totally different place, right? Like, and you've only been in the airplane an hour, even in a Cessna, maybe an hour and a half, and
Yeah.
you land, you get out, and there's these rows of these huge pine trees, and you're like, I've been teleported, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, I've been
Uh-huh.
teleported this
Yeah.
new place. That never gets old. Gil,
Another fun
oh,
flight just last
hit me up, man.
another
Tell me.
really fun flight that we did. It was I think it was last fall or something like that, where like it's some Sunday and we get up and we're like, oh, where are we gonna fly today? And I was like, well, let's fly around Lake Michigan. I was like, well, should we do it clockwise or counterclockwise? And we're like, okay, let's just do it clockwise. And you take off from Madison and you go north, and then you just follow the lake around clockwise, and just like stopping at little airports and having a good time. And it's a day long flight, right? Like I think for us, it was like 5 hours of flying or something like that. But it's a day long, and you stop and you have a snack and you have some ice cream, and like there's this picturesque airport here, it's Sault Ste. Marie, and then there's this other fantastic airport in the woods over here, and then there's this and there's that, and you're meeting people at these airports, and you're just having a good time, and it feels like an adventure, right? Like you just did an adventure on a normal boring Sunday, dreading the work week. Instead of dreading the work week, you did an adventure.
Well, and that's the advantage of having the aircraft that you do, and the aircraft that you're about to have, right? Is that you have something that's fast enough to do that in a day. We've got a buddy of mine that did that over a course of a couple days, I believe, in a 172, because it's just not quite for that thing.
A
The other thing I'll
little
say for
rough.
you is go to next time this summer, maybe go to Beaver Island. I'm obsessed
Oh,
with it now. I don't know
okay.
what's there. It's probably a bunch of crazy people. They can let me know in the comments. But it's like out in the middle of Lake Michigan. It'd be like going to the Bahamas for a day. It's all sandy beaches.
So,
Anyway,
yeah. Flying over Lake Michigan scares me. It's cold water, right? Like it's not the same as flying
yeah,
over.
no, you'll die. You'll 100% die.
Yeah, that's
on
not
th-
on my.
on that note, should we wrap up the show? Uh, Gil, this has been awesome. I'm so excited to have had you on to tell this. People were saying this is like their favorite. No, Jason, no one's flying under the Mackinac Bridge. That one guy did.
Not with the camera rolling.
No, the camera rolling. Seriously, though, this has been awesome. I hope people, after hearing this story, are inspired to do this trip themselves, do something like this themselves. I think that part of the reason why I was excited to have you on tonight is because my longest flight so far, like Iowa, right? Like, that's not Brazil, but it's like I feel like we just need to like stretch our legs a little bit more. These things we have access to, if we're lucky enough to be the pilot side of the aviation enthusiasts, is we can do this teleportation, this magic carpet stuff.
Yeah.
And part of it is just like having confidence in yourself and going for it.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's so many fun airports, right? Like it's, if you figure out what a 2-hour circle for your airplane, right, around your home base, and then look at what's in there, and there is going to be a few really fun places, right? Like we discovered state parks and national parks that have airports in them, where it's like you just land in the park, and then you go on a hike, and then you get some ice cream, and then you fly home, right? Like fantastic, fun mission.
Buy some pizza. That's kind of your thing, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Guil, and everybody else in the chat. You hung out for the extra long show, but I thank you for doing it. But that's an epic trip, and we need an epic show to cover it all. Just thanks again so much for watching. Be sure to check out next week. I got a guess. It's not confirmed, but I think it'll be a good one once we get it all lined up. And yeah, I hope you're all good. I hope you're safe. I hope you're getting ready to go fly and planning an awesome trip. And we'll see you next week. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you.